One very common piece of advice to a writer is to read, to be a reader. And most of the time it's just left at that. I have never run across much discussion as to why it's a good idea to be a writer, to be a reader, to become a better writer. Now, everyone hears voices, and I'm not talking about the delusional, like schizophrenic, audio hallucination voices. I'm talking about how there are different subconscious entities that will talk to us, and those are the inner voices that we hear. When we read, what happens is the words on the page become a voice in our head, and this is where there is a new arrangement, or a new arrangement of brain functioning, where we don't hear like we hear with our ears, but it takes on some of the quality of the sound of words. This is not ordinary thought, if there is such a thing. This is one of those cases of a specialized way of thinking. So as an exercise, you can read a book, but with the sole purpose of experiencing this phenomena. So what happens is that we're reading a book and we're caught up in the story, and then we put the book down and we're going through our regular day, and then there's this inner narrator that is following us around. Let's say that it's Sunday and you want to walk down and meet your cousin at the automotive conversion yard because you have a first-generation solar panel that you aren't using anymore and you want to drop off there. So you're walking down the road and the inner narrator is now following you because 20 minutes earlier you were reading a book. And if you're reading a book that was written in third person, the inner narrator, you can hear the voice of the inner narrator saying, they walk down the road, kicking up dust here and there, as the clouds departed from the sky, the new spring sunshine warmed the road, and you're walking along, and it's like walking under the rusty gateway into the yard, a calamity. And so all of a sudden you have this new functioning in your brain, except it is no longer parroting the words on the page. It's saying brand new, this is brand new material. This is a part of your brain that has kind of picked up the gist of the writerly voice and is now creating brand new material fit for the page. We can all have amazing experiences in life. We can all have meaningful experiences and compelling experiences, overwhelming experiences, go through points in our life that very much engage us in thought and problem solving. But if those experiences, if those situations aren't translated into something worth putting into words, then they aren't thought out in an effective way for becoming stories. Now, it may sound like I'm going towards autobiography, and not necessarily. This is just because my interest is in fiction writing. I do not turn away from this particular concentration, this particular approach to becoming a better writer, because it also is extremely effective for fiction writing. So a written experience is very different from an actual experience. It is, we may have the same thoughts about what you know, the events that we're going through or the events that fictional characters are going through, but we need to put it into a written form. That is just the nature of the medium. And by reading, we acquire this hardware. It's sort of like putting in a new expansion card into your computer. You're putting in a new form of taking one body of information and translating it into one that is fit for the page. The goal is to develop an inner narrator, through practice, you acquire that inner voice, the inner narrator that can create words out of experience, can package experience in very effective sentences that will pack as much of that experience and get at the essence of that experience in a writerly way. The great thing about this whole approach to writing is how natural it is to the human brain, how native it is to the way that we think. So every time you read a poem, a short story, a book, you are strengthening this inner narrator. As an exercise, read a short story, but become consciously aware to how reading creates an inner voice and how you're hearing the thoughts in your mind while you're reading. Gaining an inner narrator is a lot like gaining an inner detective, because the inner narrator following you around, talking to you, will form experience into very clear ideas, will be interested in putting together sentences that get at the essence of people's behavior and the essence of what happens and the essence of what a particular location feels like and the politics of that location. So it besides helping your writing, it also is one of those incredible ways of becoming much more perceptive, gives you a lot more cognitive leverage, gives you a lot more cognitive abilities and just in your regular life. One really fun aspect is that if you read a book by Tolstoy, for a while your inner narrator will have more of a Tolstoy way of thinking about your life. And that is your real life and the fiction that you're working on. And if you read a book by Sylvia Plath, then your inner narrator will pick up on some of those definite patterns of thought of Sylvia Plath, and then some of the subtler, the more nebulous patterns of insight that have become part of the Sylvia Plath outlook on life. There is something that is mentally very contagious about writing. A lot of the times, all it takes to create a writer is for that individual to read a book. And when we read a book, we can benefit from all the effort and the willpower and the struggle of a writer. When there is a writer that has put 10 years into a book and it's elbow grease and really hard work into this one beloved work of art, then what we can do by reading that, we can gain all of the advantages that writer, we can gain a lot of the advantages that writer gained through hard work. We can also benefit from all of that hard work. So just by reading it, we can acquire some of the new higher brain functioning that writer acquired over long periods of time. We can acquire some of those higher levels of thinking through a much shorter period of time. And of course, if you turn around and start using that newly gained inner narrator, these new brain functions, then you're that much closer to completing the cycle. If you then share your writing with other people, then you have made a complete circle. And in becoming a writer, so many writers become a writer after they read that first great book. And we can read a great book and then enjoy afterwards, for weeks afterwards, we're followed around by an inner narrator who's giving us higher perceptiveness into everything that we're experiencing and imagining. And if you want those brain functions to continue, then of course you also want to write. If you're interested in raising your IQ, increasing your mental abilities, this is an excellent way to do that. Our subconscious is set up to pick up new functioning capabilities that are passed down to us through culture. And this is one of those where we are just ready to adapt to the new levels of functioning. As an imagined scenario, let's have a scenario where, let's say that there is an individual, very creative, really funny, interesting, fictional ideas, who has never really read a book, who might have read the first couple of chapters of a book that they didn't pick out, that they weren't really that interested in reading. So they might have these vague, not fully formed, but very creative, original stories. Now, so this individual walks into some used bookstore tucked away in the part of town that doesn't get as much foot traffic, finds a book, the title's really, peculiar, and looks at it, and just after reading the first page, turns it, starts reading, ends up they have made a great discovery. This book is just amazing, and it's only 90 pages. By the second day, they have finished it. And then for a week after, now they have an inner narrator talking to them in their mind in third person, because the book was written in third person, describing life, instead of me, I, we, they, he, she, in third person, and gets a new creative idea, but this time it just blossoms because it has the inner narrator with the capabilities of fleshing that story out and conceiving of that story in a writerly way. It takes on a new form and a new solidity that fictional idea never could have had before. When you find a book that you're interested in, that you yourself picked out, that represents those deeper, yet to be realized passions of your life, and you read that book, that author, you have increased your IQ. This is one of those things that happen with the human brain, where you have become a more intelligent individual. The acquired brain power of that author, still living or no longer living, has boosted your brain power and passed it on to you. Now, one of the things I like most about this phenomena is it is not copycat. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about becoming a living video recorder. When you gain the inner narrator, that is its own voice. It will start talking to you with original material. That inner narrator will, in your mind, you'll find yourself thinking out stories that have never been thought before. And yes, it does have some of the personality attributes that were found in some of the most recent fiction that you've read, but it's almost like the ghost of those books, and yet it's its own new storyline. It's really just it's something, you know, a human can enjoy so much in their lives. Now, what I am about to talk about, I am not saying disregard school. As a side note, robots are going to start taking all the low-skill jobs. We need, as humans, we need to get as good education as we possibly can just to survive in the generations to follow. But education, it would be possible for free worldwide education, but that is a side note. What I want to talk about is that it's important to kind of go your own way. Do this outside of school. Find that book you love outside of school. Find it on your own. If there are still used bookstores in your town, go to them, and eventually it might, you know, and then of course online you can is a just an amazing resource. And when you do find that masterpiece that is something you found on your own and read it, this is a time when that inner narrator, if it is not already part of your mental abilities, can flourish in your mind and on the page when you do go to write. If this phenomena has happened to you, leave a comment. Say, this has happened to me. After I've read a book, I was narrating stories in my mind for a week afterwards. So as an exercise, if you haven't already done so, decide to become one of those people who find a beloved masterpiece on their own, who go out in the world that you're living in and know that these treasures are out there waiting for you, waiting to be discovered. And once you find this on your own, then you know that it reflects the things in life you're most interested in, and it speaks to you very directly, and it's something that won't bore you while you're reading it. I hope this video was helpful. Again, I want to thank everyone who left comments and subscribed and hit the like button. I appreciate all your comments. It really encourages me to make more of these videos, I'm really glad to see that there are people in the world who are interested in these kinds of things. The reason I started making these videos was so that I had a way of getting the word out about the art project I'm working on, the illustrated story, Terrible Immunity, and it's written with illustrations, and I'm putting it into video format in episodes for free at solomation.com. I'm currently working on episode 5, and I want to put at least 1/3 books 1 and 2 up online for free over the next few years. Please, if you have any time, go and check that out. I hope your writing goes great, and have a good day. Now, when I first got my license, I used to borrow my mom's van and go around the neighborhood asking people if they wanted any tree limbs or any yard waste to be hauled to the dump and make money that way. And so one time we had, someone was doing a lot of pruning, and we, loaded it all up in the van, took it to the dump, and we were unloading it from the van, and I saw all these books in the dump, you know, where all the hundreds of seagulls were flying around, and I was like, wow, this is great, and I just grabbed all these books and threw them into the van, and it turned out to be all this Russian literature. So it was Dostoevsky, Gorky, Chekhov, Tolstoy, and I remember, so I read this book of short stories by Gorky, and the effect that it had, these amazing stories that my imagination was lit up, and I was like just a sense of wonder for life, and so it was one of those personal experiences of one of these masterpieces that continues to mean a lot to me to this day. As you consciously develop your inner narrator, this can become very effective for that creative vacuum that we experience. If there's part of your fictional story that you're working on that has stumped you, you just consciously give the problem to your inner narrator and wait a few days and see if and what the inner narrator comes up with. And by working with this, the inner narrator for the most part is a subconscious. It is working on levels that we cannot be fully aware of, but as some of its operations surface, we can kind of think of it as it is a part of ourselves, but you have a mutual beneficial relationship with it, where you're like, I'm very interested in solving this particular problem in the story I'm working on, and think of yourself as presenting it to the inner narrator. When you have a clear idea about what the inner narrator is, then you can decide for yourself how to develop it, how to make it stronger, how to use it to become a better writer. And if you're interested in becoming a better writer, we are always becoming better writers. There is no point where you have gotten as good as you're ever going to get. And that is one of the exciting things about being an artist, is very much unlike other pursuits in life. It is one that we have yet to find the greatest part of those efforts. They only get better. One of the important things of being conscious of this effect is to enjoy the feeling of becoming more intelligent. When you're reading a book, pay attention to this feeling of gaining brain power, gaining IQ. And the reason this is important is when we enjoy that effect, we are getting motivational pleasure from reading or other activities that make us smarter. And so this becomes our motivation. Now, if you think about, I saw one of those Hoarders episodes where people, their motivation was to gain new stuff, and they got pleasure from that, and it became an addictive behavior where they didn't care how many stuffed animals they had already, they just wanted more. And now, as sad as that situation appears, it shows what how motivated people can become. And if you pay conscious attention to the effect reading, the beneficial effects reading has, then that will put wind in your sails. That will make it so much easier for you to acquire behavior that is going to be a great benefit to you in the long run. Like any practice, like any form of exercise, reading, also remember to take your time. For a long period of time I didn't read because I was very busy producing my own artwork. And when I made it a point to occasionally read again, it was much harder for me to pick it up again because I had kind of lost that ability. And like any form of exercise, it's an ability that you gradually get better at. So remember just to kind of take your time. If if you haven't read for a while, or you've never really been a reader before, yes, it will be difficult. The way writing used to be difficult. It used to be so hard for us to draw each letter, A, B, and eventually we could do it without thinking. And this is another one of those where you'll enjoy it a lot more if you cut yourself some slack, take your time, don't try to become a heavy reader at first, and then gradually become more and more of a reader as you go along.